They made you question your memory, twist your words, doubt your sanity. You gave love, they weaponized it. You offered honesty, they used it as a blade. Nights spent replaying every conversation, wondering if it really was your fault. You weren't weak, you were groomed, slowly, skillfully, deliberately. That's the narcissist's craft. They don't break you with fists, they break you with distortion. They shrink your world until the only reality that matters is theirs. Until your silence is interpreted as guilt, your boundaries as betrayal, your pain as manipulation. You're not living, you're performing, just to keep the storm from coming. And then one day the storm comes anyway. So now, you stop performing, you stop pleading, you stop hoping they'll understand what they were never wired to feel. Because here's the truth, they never want you to learn. You don't need to destroy them. You only need to unplug from them. The moment you reclaim your mind, your stillness, your internal compass, you become lethal. Not with aggression, with indifference. Narcissists don't fear rage, they feed on it. They fear detachment, they fear your silence, they fear your refusal to react, because it leaves them alone with the thing they fear most, their own emptiness. This video isn't about revenge, it's about strategy. Cold, clear, ethical detachment. The kind Marcus Aurelius would wield with one glance. You're not here to fight, you're here to exit, without apology, without noise, without negotiation. As Aurelius once wrote, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. This is where we turn principle into protection. With the wisdom of the Stoics and the piercing insight of Jordan Peterson, we'll walk through the psychological shifts that make you unreadable, unshakable, untouchable to every manipulator who once fed off your fire. If this message hits you where it hurts, drop a 1 in the comments. If not yet, drop a 0. Every bit of feedback sharpens this channel. And if you've lived through narcissistic abuse, your story matters. Share it below. Someone else might finally recognize the game because you named it. Like, share. Subscribe to Victory Stoic. This isn't just content, this is ammunition for the war inside your mind. You've suffered enough, now it's time they starve. Number 1. Stop explaining. You're not a student in their classroom anymore. Every time you explain yourself to a narcissist, you crawl back into the cage they built. A cage made of invisible expectations, circular logic, and emotional bait you're trained to bite. You think your explanations will bring peace, but they never do. Because peace was never the point. Control was. They asked you why, not because they didn't understand, but because they knew you would answer. And the longer you explained, the more ground they took. You stood in front of them like a defendant on trial for crimes you didn't commit, praying they'd finally say, "That makes sense. I get it now." But that moment never came, did it? Because they weren't confused. They were in charge. This is one of the most brutal truths to accept. Your clarity is not what they fear. Your silence is. The more you explain, the more you signal that you're still trying to win their approval. And that tells them they still own you. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, wrote, "Never value anything as profitable to yourself, which shall compel you to break your promise, to lose your self-respect, to hate any man, to suspect, to curse, to act the hypocrite, to desire anything that needs walls and curtains." Explaining yourself constantly, bending your truth to gain favor, is a form of spiritual hypocrisy. And over time, it rots you from the inside. Let me tell you about John, 44, an auto repair shop owner in St. Louis. For 3 years, he dated a woman who questioned his every decision. Why he didn't respond fast enough, why he worked too late, why he needed so much space. John, a decent man with a strong work ethic, kept answering her, patiently, repeatedly. He'd write long texts explaining his stress, his schedule, his intentions. Each time he thought, if I can just explain it right, this fight will end. But the fights didn't end. They reset. Same script, different week. Until one day, exhausted and hollow, he said nothing. No reply, just space. And she imploded. Not because he'd done anything, but because the performance was over. Psychologically, this is classic trauma response. According to Dr. Jennifer Fried's research on institutional betrayal, repeated self-explanation is a survival tactic. Victims of manipulation often develop what she calls betrayal blindness, a state in which the victim rationalizes the abuse in order to maintain the relationship. Explaining becomes a way to stabilize chaos, but all it does is feed it. Jordan Peterson warns about this dynamic with clinical precision. In 12 Rules for Life, he writes, "Do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. But apply this to yourself. Don't let yourself do anything that makes you lose respect for who you've become." Constantly justifying your truth to someone who's only pretending to misunderstand it, that kills your dignity, piece by piece. Narcissists don't want resolution. They want dominance masquerading as dialogue. They will shift the goalpost, redefine your words, claim emotional harm, play the victim, anything to keep you explaining. Because as long as you're explaining, you're on their stage. You're in their classroom. And they're the teacher, holding the red pen. But here's the truth. You already graduated. You owe no lectures, no essays, no permission slips for your boundaries. The more you clarify, the more you imply that your truth is up for debate. It isn't. Want to destroy their power? Say it once, then go silent. No follow-up text, no second conversation. Let your original statement hang in the air like a blade. Let them squirm in the void you refuse to fill. Narcissists drown in silence because silence doesn't give them a script to manipulate. Let's talk application. Here's something you can do tonight. Sit down and write 3 core beliefs or boundaries you tend to over-explain. Maybe it's "I need space after work," or "I don't tolerate yelling," or "I'm not going to be available every weekend." Now, rewrite each one as a single-sentence policy without justification. Say it how a Stoic would: calm, direct, clean. Then next time someone pushes you, read the sentence. Say it once, then disengage. The pain will come, the guilt, the urge to make peace, the fear of seeming rude. Let it come. That's detox, that's deconditioning. You've been trained to explain because somewhere along the way, someone made you believe your truth wasn't enough on its own. But it is. And the only way to prove that to yourself is to stop performing. Peterson again, when you have something to say, silence is a lie. But silence after you've spoken your truth, that's power. That's clarity. That's a line drawn in stone. So next time you're tempted to explain yourself to someone who isn't listening, pause. Then ask, am I clarifying or am I begging to be seen? If it's the second, stop. Stand still. Let your boundaries speak in your place. They're louder than you think. Because the moment you stop explaining, the moment you realize you're not a student in their classroom anymore, that's the moment you stop bleeding power and start reclaiming it. Number 2, burn the script. You're not in their play anymore. Every narcissist is a playwright. They craft the scenes, cast the roles, and hand you your lines. You're the loyal one, the crazy one, the difficult one, the one who always comes back. They don't want you to improvise. They don't want your truth. They want your obedience. And the moment you stop reading the script, the moment you go off book, the entire performance collapses. This script is predictable once you see it. It goes like this. They provoke, you react, they blame, you explain, they forgive temporarily, and then it repeats. It's not drama, it's choreography, designed to drain you, and it only works if you keep showing up for rehearsals. But something changes the day you stop delivering your lines. Something breaks, not in you, but in them. Because you've just become the one thing they can't control, unpredictable. Let's talk about Rachel, 39, a marketing strategist in Atlanta. For years, she played the girlfriend who had to fix her tone, prove her loyalty, justify her past, and be more understanding. Her partner, a covert narcissist, always found a way to be disappointed, no matter how much she did. One night, after yet another argument that ended in tears and accusations, she stood in silence. He asked, "Don't you have anything to say for yourself?" She looked at him and said, "Not this time. You'll have to finish this scene alone." And she walked out, not just from the room, but from the entire play. That line, that refusal, was more powerful than any argument, because narcissists don't fear confrontation. They fear abandonment of the script. When you no longer play your part, their performance falls flat. And without an audience, the narcissist withers. Their control depends on your participation. Remove that, and you remove their oxygen. Here's the Stoic anchor in all of this. Epictetus said, "Remember that you are an actor in a play, the character of which is determined by the playwright. But it is your business to play your role well, and to exit when necessary." Most people misread this, thinking Stoicism demands passive endurance. It doesn't. It demands awareness. If the play is corrupt, exit with dignity. You owe no loyalty to a toxic narrative. Let's use an image. Picture a stage, dimly lit. You stand center, under a spotlight you never asked for. Around you, a set built from your guilt, your confusion, your hope. Off stage, the director whispers cues, apologize now, say you'll change, cry, then beg. But you go quiet. You drop the script, you walk to the edge of the stage, and step into the dark. That's not giving up. That's reclaiming authorship. Peterson captures this dynamic in Maps of Meaning. To participate in a lie corrupts the soul. The lie here is the role they wrote for you. Every time you speak on cue, shrink on command, or perform loyalty in the face of disrespect, you reinforce a false identity. Over time, that false self becomes a prison, and the only way out is to reject the story entirely. Here's how you start rewriting the story tonight. Do a script detox. Write down 3 phrases you find yourself saying often in conflict with this person. Things like, I didn't mean it like that, or I'm just trying to help, or why can't you see I care? Now ask, whose lines are these? If they're not yours, burn them, literally or metaphorically. Then write 3 phrases of your own, truths that don't ask permission. Something like, that doesn't work for me, or this conversation is going in circles, or even, I won't defend myself for having needs. Use them, say them, and then exit. Rachel, after walking out that night, didn't go no contact right away. But she stopped playing the emotional ping pong. When her partner sent walls of text, she replied with 1 sentence. When he tried to bait her into old arguments, she said, I'm not doing this. Eventually, he stopped, not because he grew, but because the stage was gone. Marcus Aurelius, in his Quiet Fury, once wrote, let them howl if they want to. That is their business. I have mine. The narcissist will howl when you leave their stage. They will rage, weep, threaten, flatter, shift into every emotional form, like a shapeshifter desperate to lure you back into the story. But that's the test. Do you go back to the script, or do you start writing your own? And no, you won't feel triumphant right away. You'll feel guilty, empty, afraid. Because withdrawal from emotional addiction is painful. You were trained to believe peace only came after the resolution of their chaos. But true peace comes when you stop needing resolution altogether. One last tip, when you feel tempted to re-engage, say aloud, this is just Act 3. I've already walked off stage. Anchor it in your nervous system. Make it real. Because you don't owe them a final scene. You owe yourself a final decision. Peterson reminds us, the purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be strong. And strength in this case doesn't look like yelling louder. It looks like walking away and never returning to the script. So if you're still watching, still with us, drop a 1 in the comments. It means you're done performing. You're done auditioning for the love you should have received freely. And it means you're ready to kill the character they wrote for you and step into the story you were born to write yourself. Number 3, be the mirror and watch them squirm. Let me tell you a story. A guy named Travis, 41, from Ohio, was dating this woman who, let's say, really loved herself. You couldn't finish a sentence without her interrupting to explain how it related to her childhood, her dreams, or her eyebrows. Travis couldn't get a word in without her flipping it into some crisis about her feelings. One day, she launched into another monologue about how everyone misunderstands her genius, and Travis, God bless him, just nodded. Silent. No. Oh no, baby. No debate. No comfort. Just a calm, slightly tilted head, as if he were studying a wild animal in its natural habitat. She lost her mind. Why are you looking at me like that? You think I'm crazy, don't you? Say something. But Travis didn't say a word. He just sipped his coffee like it was the most fascinating weather report he'd ever heard. Why did she spiral? Because narcissists aren't afraid of being judged. They're afraid of being seen. When you respond calmly, silently, without flattery, without argument, without emotional fuel, what you're really doing is holding up a mirror. And what stares back at them is the thing they spend their entire lives running from: emptiness. You don't have to fight them. You just have to not flinch when the performance starts. That stillness? It's excruciating for someone who spent years managing how others see them. You're not giving applause. You're not booing either. You're just standing there, quietly refusing to participate in their illusion, and it drives them insane. Marcus Aurelius would have loved this move. He once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Translation: don't clap. Don't counter. Just be unshakably you. That alone is a kind of divine vengeance. Here's your weapon: non-reactional presence. You become a blank screen. When they try to project, nothing sticks. When they try to bait, there's no bite. It's like watching someone throw darts at a wall and scream because it won't bleed. And Jordan Peterson? He'd say you're refusing to be pulled into their chaos. He talks about cleaning your room before fixing the world. In this case, your room is your emotional boundary. If you stay clean, their mess doesn't stick to you. You want to try this? Here's your home exercise. Next time someone tries to provoke, demand validation, or over-explain themselves into a position of moral superiority, do nothing. Tilt your head. Blink slowly. Take a sip of your drink. Say, huh. Then just let that silence breathe. Watch them unravel. Because some people don't need to be argued with. They need to be left alone with their own reflection. And you're just the mirror. Number 4. Stop apologizing for having a spine. They don't want you to say sorry because you were wrong. They want you to say sorry because you were real. Because the moment you said something honest, even if it was soft, calm, grounded in fact, they felt their grip loosen, and they panicked. So they reached for their favorite weapon: guilt. Not rage, not punishment, guilt. It's subtle, isn't it? You express a boundary: I need some space tonight. Suddenly you're cold, uncaring, selfish. You make a decision without asking their permission. I took the new job. Now you're disloyal, ungrateful, distant. You say something they don't want to hear. That hurt me. Now you're sensitive, too emotional, dramatic. And before you know it, you're spiraling into an apology for existing as yourself. Let's stop here. Because this is where the real damage happens. Not in the yelling, not in the gaslighting, but in the quiet, subtle conditioning that makes you believe being real is a crime. And that crime must be atoned for with the one currency narcissists crave more than love: submission. Toxic people don't use guilt because it's dramatic. They use it because it works. It's a psychological crowbar. And it works especially well on good people. Why? Because you're already reflective. You're already willing to check yourself, to own your flaws, to be fair. You've got a conscience, and they've turned it into a leash. Marcus Aurelius warned about this mental hijacking. He wrote, "The approval of others is a poor substitute for self-respect." When you start apologizing for what's true, for what's necessary, for what's aligned, you're not being kind. You're being conquered. Slowly, elegantly, with a smile. Let's talk about Logan, 46, a former Marine turned fitness coach in Arizona. For years, he stayed in a marriage where every disagreement ended the same way. Not with resolution, but with him saying, "I'm sorry." Why? Because his wife would freeze him out, twist the narrative, bring up his military service like it was some emotional defect. You don't know how to connect. The more he tried to meet her halfway, the more she moved the line. Until one day after another fight where he said, "I just needed some space," and she replied, "You're impossible to love." Something broke in him. Not anger, just a bone-deep clarity. "I'm apologizing for breathing." That night, he didn't sleep on the couch. He didn't write a long message. He didn't beg. He packed a bag and left, quietly. Not to punish her, but to stop punishing himself. Because that's what it becomes. A war you wage on yourself to keep the peace with someone who's declared war on your identity. Jordan Peterson talks about this with brutal honesty. In 12 Rules for Life, he says, if you betray yourself, if you say untrue things, if you act out a lie, you weaken your character. You dissolve your strength. You will come to despise yourself. What feels like being the bigger person sometimes is actually being the smaller version of yourself. And the longer you do it, the more foreign your own truth begins to feel. Here's what no one tells you. You don't owe anyone comfort at the expense of your clarity. You don't owe anyone softness when your truth is steel. And you sure as hell don't owe anyone an apology for standing upright while they expected you to kneel. Guilt, in the hands of manipulators, isn't about justice. It's about leverage. If they can't dominate you physically or intellectually, they'll dominate your self-perception. You'll walk around thinking you're too harsh, too blunt, too selfish, when all you really did was decline to be devoured. Let's use an image. Imagine your spine is made of iron. Every time you say something true, it glows a little brighter. Every time you compromise that truth to make someone else more comfortable, a piece of it rusts. You don't notice it at first, but one day you reach for your voice and nothing comes out. Not because you lost it, but because you handed it over, piece by piece, apology by apology. Now, how do you stop? It starts with a principle. If the apology is meant to keep you in a role you never agreed to play, don't say it. Here's a simple practice. Next time you feel guilt rising, don't rush to explain or fix it. Instead, ask yourself, is what I said or did aligned with my values? If yes, hold. Breathe. Repeat silently, I'm allowed to exist, I'm allowed to disagree, I'm allowed to walk away. Let the discomfort pass. It's not a signal you did wrong. It's withdrawal from a lifetime of bending. And when they say things like, so you're just going to ignore how I feel, or I guess you don't care about us anymore, don't defend, don't justify. Say this, I care, but I'm not going to apologize for having boundaries. Say it once, then walk. Let them deal with the silence. Let them rage in the vacuum where your guilt used to live. Peterson says, to stand up means voluntarily accepting the burden of being. And yes, that burden includes knowing that some people will hate you for not collapsing. But that's not your weight to carry. That's their weakness to confront. So the next time you feel pressured to say sorry for simply being yourself, remember, you're not apologizing for cruelty, you're being punished for honesty. You didn't betray them. You just stopped betraying yourself. And if you're still watching this video right now, still here, still breathing through that truth, comment 1 below, because that small act means something big. You've decided your spine matters more than their comfort, and that's where everything changes. Number 5, let silence speak. They'll hear themselves, eventually. There's a kind of silence that isn't passive. It isn't surrender, it isn't avoidance, it's a weapon. Sharper than a scream, colder than a slap, and far more devastating. It's the silence you hold after a narcissist throws their latest tantrum, monologue, or guilt trip, and you give them absolutely nothing. Not anger, not sympathy, not protest, not even a sigh, just silence. And in that silence, something terrifying happens. They start to hear their own voice, raw, unfiltered, repetitive, empty. Because here's what no one tells you. Narcissists don't hear themselves until you stop giving them something to echo off. They need your reaction to feel real. They depend on your voice to justify their story. Your counterpoints give their manipulation structure. Take that away, and their mind eats itself. Think of it like this. When you stop talking, they're trapped in a room with their own monologue, and that monologue is cracked, illogical, cruel, and fragile. It only sounds powerful when someone else is present to prop it up with resistance. Without your engagement, it collapses under its own weight. Let me show you what this looks like. Ben, 48, works in construction management in Michigan. He spent years in a relationship with someone who could start a 3-hour argument over how he said, sure. Every disagreement turned into a psychological maze. Accusations, shifting blame, tearful guilt tactics, silent treatments. Ben used to engage. He'd explain, defend, try to prove he wasn't a bad guy. The more he talked, the deeper he sank. Then one day, he stopped. In the middle of her 4th consecutive rant about how he didn't care enough, he looked her in the eye, gave the faintest shrug, and said nothing. Not a word. Just folded his arms. Still. Calm. She kept going. 10 minutes. 20. Her voice cracked. The insults got wilder. Then came the silence. And in that space, she heard herself. For the first time, she stormed out, because the mirror was too clear. That's the power of strategic silence. It's not coldness, it's clarity. You're not withdrawing to punish them. You're withdrawing to stop feeding the delusion that their chaos is worth debating. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best answer to anger is silence." But he didn't mean the silence of cowardice. He meant the silence of sovereignty, of refusing to be dragged into emotional quicksand by someone who doesn't care if you drown. Psychologically, here's what's happening. Manipulative personalities rely on intermittent reinforcement, a behavioral conditioning pattern where inconsistent rewards, your attention, empathy, reactions, keep them hooked and keep you compliant. When you go silent, consistently, without explanation, you're breaking that cycle. You're removing the hit of dopamine they get from watching you squirm. But make no mistake, they'll escalate before they collapse. The silence will trigger them. First with confusion, then accusation, then maybe even sweetness. They'll poke, they'll bait. They'll whisper, "Wow, I guess you just don't care anymore." That's not vulnerability. That's provocation. And you breathe. You stay silent. You sip your coffee like it's a morning meditation. Jordan Peterson frames this beautifully. He says, "Do not interrupt people when they are making a mistake." In this case, their mistake is believing they can still control you. Let them keep talking. Let them spiral. Let the silence become a hall of mirrors where their own words echo louder and louder until they finally hit themselves in the face. Here's an image to hold. Imagine a stage, a single spotlight. Their center stage, shouting, weeping, grandstanding. But the audience, you, has left the building. No applause, no boos, just empty seats. Eventually, even the most dramatic actor realizes the performance is over. They either fall silent or walk off stage. Here's something practical. Try the 45-second rule. When someone launches into a manipulative rant, let them talk, but time your silence. Don't interrupt. Don't react. Give it 45 seconds. Then ask a question that redirects yourself, not them. Something like, "Are you finished?" or "Does this serve anything?" Then go silent again. You'll see the confusion crack through their performance like a fault line, because the longer you say nothing, the more they start to panic. Not because you're gone, but because you've stopped being predictable. Predictability is safety for narcissists. Silence? That's chaos. That's losing control. And here's the real twist. In that silence, you start to hear yourself again too. Your instincts, your truth, your exhaustion. You realize how much noise you've absorbed just trying to survive a conversation that was never a conversation, just a trap. You'll be tempted to fill the silence. Don't. That's the old programming. You were trained to soothe, explain, defend. But every time you speak just to smooth their feelings, you trade your power for temporary peace. And that peace never lasts. Not with them. So next time they launch the speech, stop rehearsing your reply. Let the silence settle. Let it stretch. Let it suffocate the performance. You don't need to destroy them. You just need to stop giving them a reason to keep performing. Let them talk. You're listening to yourself now. Conclusion. The war isn't won by fighting. It's won by stopping the performance. You were never crazy. You were conditioned, trained to react, to rush, to explain, to carry the weight of their insecurity while calling it love. They taught you that silence meant guilt, that delay meant punishment, that honesty was cruelty, and that having a spine was a sin. But you're here now, and that means something shifted. You've started to feel the itch behind their words. The script they expect you to follow no longer fits. You're not apologizing for breathing. You're not explaining your boundaries like a student begging to pass. You're not sprinting to reply, just to avoid their cold rage or hot guilt. What you've done, by seeing through it, by stopping the game, is worse than fighting back. You've disconnected. You've unplugged. You've become unreadable, unshakable, and worst of all, to them, boring. Because here's the truth. You don't defeat a narcissist by screaming. You defeat them by refusing to play your part. You don't win by explaining. You win by making no offer to negotiate your worth. This is just part one. There are still moves left to reveal, more tools to sharpen. But for now, if you felt the burn of truth in even one of these psychological shifts, then you're already one step out of their loop. Drop a 1 in the comments if this content speaks to the war inside you. Drop a 0 if it didn't hit you yet. We'll keep digging until it does. Share your story if you've lived this. Your voice might be the warning someone else needs. Like, share. Subscribe to Victory Stoic. This isn't just a channel, it's a campfire for those burning the old script. The mask is off. The silence is loud. The rules have changed. Part 2 is coming, and it's going to be colder, sharper, deadlier. We're not here to survive them. We're here to outgrow them. On our terms.